Charlie Princely says we can see you and hear you okay.
Awesome. Okay, so then I'll start. So, hello everyone. My name is Fedor. I'm Salesforce developer from Luxoft. And today I'm going to talk about CI/CD solution using GitHub and Azure pipeline. I know that some of you might feel that this stack of technology is a bit controversial, but bear with me, I think that I have a good enough reason to actually use pipelines. So clicker doesn't work, right? Sure. So, never mind. So I think it is safe to assume that all of you have at least some experience working with or setting up CI/CD for Salesforce. And if not, that's okay. There is an awesome trailhead that explains that topic using GitLab as a platform. And actually, it is understandable why a lot of companies choose GitLab as a platform for both their source control and for CI/CD and other stuff. And by the way, fun fact, GitLab are the only one who doesn't have a dedicated logo for their CI/CD, and that is why this slide looks a bit odd. But anyways, in Luxoft, we prefer to use Bitbucket and TeamCity. And well, basically all other Atlassian products you can think of or name of, but that's the other story. And if you really want to be kind of a special kid in the town, you can always use Jenkins or Travis and any other source control solution you want. So it might seem that this whole topic, CI/CD for Salesforce, it is well enough covered. There's nothing for me to do here, right? But there is one problem that I see here. And what if we don't have a big team, for example? Or what if we want to do some proof of concept work, short-term projects, something like 2, 3, maybe 4 sprints long? Would you consider setting up CI/CD for that, really? Well, I doubt that, to be honest. I think you would end up with some source control solution to synchronize your changes, sure. But CI/CD is a little bit over the top because it is, hard to set up. It takes time. You might not have time to do that. So usually small projects tend to be made without it at all. But I would prefer to have, a little bit more civilized solution. So we don't mess up right before the demo to our customer, as it usually happens, So on the one hand, we do want CI/CD because we understand why it is important. It is important to make sure nothing breaks. On the other hand, we don't want it because it is too complex to set up. So we want something that is easy to set up and that doesn't require maintenance, something lightweight. So ask yourself, if you and the person sitting next to you were assigned to do some small project, what kind of source control solution will you choose? And I guess it is GitHub, right? Because you have an account on GitHub, person sitting next to you have an account on GitHub. Everyone in this room probably have an account on GitHub. You don't have to explain how it works. You don't need to somehow set up it specially. It is a common knowledge. But there's a problem with GitHub. There's no built-in CI solution there. Actually, GitHub Actions, the one they are working right now, is still in closed beta, so we cannot use it, unfortunately. And we have to find some other solution. And for that, we will actually go to current GitHub's overlords, Microsoft. And as a matter of fact, Azure Pipelines is already adapted to use GitHub as a source control solution. It works pretty much fine. And there's only one question that still has to be answered. Is this easy to set up? Is this solution lightweight even? Yeah. So right now I'll show you how it can be set up, and you can decide whether it is lightweight or not. So first things first. So the first step to set it up, we have to actually create an SFDX project and to retrieve all metadata, all code, everything as a baseline for our work. The second step is to actually upload it to our GitHub repository, share access with teammates that we are going to work with, do that kind of stuff. And the last simple step here is to go to github.marketplace.com and to search for Azure pipelines and basically click install. Yeah, that's kind of easy. So after a couple of setup screens where you basically select your repository, you will see something like this. This is a general UI for Azure pipelines, and this is how it looks. It allows you to select different source control solutions, but for the sake of the presentation, we are sticking to GitHub because it is easy and it doesn't require you anything to do. It is out-of-the-box solution. And as a lot of other CI/CD solutions, Azure Pipelines uses YAML that you can see on the screen to configure your builds. And by the way, the cool thing here is that you can take the YAML from the trailhead that I have mentioned earlier that uses GitLab and use it in your Azure pipeline. It will work because it is a universal common standard to configure builds. Those of you who have done some setup of CI/CD are probably familiar with YAML, but for those who don't, it is a markup language that is commonly used whenever you need to set up something that has some particular order of execution. So, simply speaking, it is a step-by-step script, nothing more. So, what can we do with YAML? And before we proceed, I want you to excuse me because I know that I could have made this presentation a little bit more entertaining with funny pictures and that kind of stuff, but you would not believe that I'm legit and that I know what I'm speaking about. So please brace yourself. Slides with code are coming. There will be nothing funny there. So what can we do with YAML? First thing that we will use are triggers. And triggers are, well, they are a YAML script that define what will trigger your build. So basically you can select either branch that will trigger your build, or tag, or file path. There are a couple of other options that you can use, or you can even exclude something. So for example, depending on your scenario, you can either, include all hotfix branches but exclude master branch, or exclude some specific tag, something like hotfix, because you know it is a hotfix and you don't want to trigger build, or it solely depends on your scenario. The other thing that we can do is a pull request trigger. It is basically the same as a PR, as is general trigger, but PR trigger is triggered when, sorry for that, yeah, it's triggered whenever someone creates a pull request. So choosing between trigger and pull request trigger depends on the scenario that you would like to cover. Mostly we use PR triggers whenever we want to test out some specific feature before committing it to our development branch or master branch, call it whatever you like. And with general triggers, we usually use them to run some unit tests and stuff like that afterwards, all the code being pushed to one branch, sorry. Pull. Pull is not important for us, to be honest. It's just the list of operating systems that you can use for, actually not the operating systems per se, but virtual machines that you can use for your build. By default it is Ubuntu, and I don't know, maybe you do want to set some other option, but for you to not to be afraid, it's not important for us, leave it as is. It's just the VM that we are going to use. Steps. Steps, on the other hand, are important for us. Steps are building blocks that define our build, and to configure those building blocks we can use one of the three options. One is being bash, to run bash commands. Script is actually a funny one. It runs commands in default terminal for your OS. So while using bash, it will use bash everywhere and even on Windows VMs. So hooray, Linux subsystem for Windows, you know. But script will run different terminals, so I wouldn't say it's a good idea to use it. And PWSH will run PowerShell. Not sure that someone in this room even know how to use PowerShell, so we will be using only one option of the three, and that is bash. Because bash is universal, you can find a lot of YAML definitions using bash. It is easy to use, and by the way, by the bash, I don't mean all this stuff. By the bash, I mean only these 4 parameters. So bash being an actual bash command we want to run, and this might be either a single command or multiple commands. Display name is the name that we will see in the Azure pipeline when the build will be running. I'll show that on the demo. And 2 other parameters, fail on std error and continue on error, allow us to either stop the build when the error occurs or to intercept the error and show it to user if that is our intention. So maybe we don't want to stop the build when some unit test failed or something like that. So that is how we can do that. So now we're a little bit more familiar with YAML, right? We have triggers to trigger the build, and we will use bash to actually do stuff with our virtual machine. And to actually work with Salesforce, we will be using CLI because we can access it from the bash. And so there are a couple of steps inside of the YAML script that we will be running that we have to do before actually accessing something in our DevHub environment. And so the first step is configuration, and I don't think that I really have to explain this part. Installing GDK, it's basically sudo apt install something. The only thing that I want to mention is that apt-get update here takes as long as all other steps in this build. I would like to exclude it because it saves a lot of time to run apt-get update, but unfortunately it's not stable without it. When the new version of GDK releases, it will fail without it, probably, I don't know. So the second configuration step is installing SFDX CLI. And unfortunately, we cannot do that with apt-get anyhow. But we can do that with this neat, pretty script from salesforcedevelopers.com. I will actually include all the links in the end so you can check out the references, but that's not some mumbo jumbo that I came up with. It's actually from the legit documentation. So now, after these 2 steps, we will have GDK installed and we will have Salesforce CLI. So another step that we have to take is to authorize with our DevHub. And authorization step takes, it doesn't take long, but this is the most tedious step of this whole setup, to be honest. Because when we are trying to authorize CLI from Visual Studio Code, it is simple. We print out something like authorize org, browser pops up, we input our username and password, and we are basically done. But right now we are running CLI inside of virtual machine. There's no way someone can actually pop up the browser and input something, right? We need some other way. And in case you are better than me with YAML and better than me with bash, you probably can set up outflow. I think it is possible, but I'm not that good, to be honest. And so we'll be using AuthJBT grant flow to authorize with the org. And for that, we'll require OpenSSL, because OpenSSL will be used to generate certificate and key for that certificate that will be used to authorize with DevHub. So once we have our certificate and key, the next step is to create a connected app. Once again, the setup for this connected app can be found on salesforcedevelopers.com. But that is a basic connected app where you upload your certificate part. So you take that file and upload it to Salesforce org that you will be using for DX. And you get consumer key and redirect URL from that connected app. The second part that we will receive from OpenSSL key will be stored in our repository. And here I need to kind of warn you not to store the key part for your production repository in the root folder of public GitHub repo, okay? I kind of think that has to be said. Safeguard it, please. Don't mess up with security. But once our key is stored in our GitHub repository, Azure pipelines can access it. And so we can use fourth house GPT grant CLI command to authorize our dev org. By providing the path to key, consumer key, and F, I believe it is for alias of the sandbox. It is useful for the further commands, to be honest. It's not required, but it is easier to use it. So once this command passes, our dev hub should be authorized. And now the last and the funny step is to do some actions with the org. And here you're limited by what you can actually do with CLI. So for the sake of this demo, I'll keep it simple, and we will just deploy everything to. We will create a new DX org. We'll deploy everything to that org, and we will show login credentials to the user, so that, for example, after you push something to your master branch, some QA in your team can go and test it out on DX before you actually deploy it to the production or somewhere. So here's a part that creates SFDX org. So it's basically org create and push. And here's a part to show credentials. And as you can see, I'm grouping bash commands here, so multiple commands in one piece of like YAML block. And I'm giving it display name so that we can read it while it's being deployed. Okay, I believe it is now a demo time because there's nothing else to explain here. So let me show you how it works. And I think I will be able to share it with everyone. So guys on the call, can you tell us if you see the browser right now?
Yep.
Yeah?
Deb.azure.com, yep.
Он затопал инструкшн.
Okay, yeah. So here's my Azure pipelines, and right now I'm going to my laptop and I'll just push some changes to trigger the build. So commit, push. Okay, so I've pushed some changes to master branch of my repository, and now this window actually belongs. And now it should pop up in DevOps as a new build that you can see here. It is called demo run because that's how I named the commit. And if we'll go into that, you can see all the steps with display names that I've provided. So initialize is actual initialization of virtual machine, checkout. I'm not sure why it's doing like that. But below there will be install NGK, install CLI, create DX org, scratch our credentials, and post job that cleans up stuff in Azure. Once again, I really don't know why it behaves like this. Well, I think it is a demo problem because, yeah, as you can see, it is real time usually. So it installs CLI, do a lot of stuff there, and as you can see, this part is being up to get updates, so it takes, I would say it takes too long to update something. But once it is done, under Scratchor credentials, we'll see credentials that we can use to access our DX environment and test our stuff. Let me switch back to my presentation.
Press here on the top.
Okay, well, let's do this another way. Okay, I hope that everyone can see the slide on the call. There are only 2 slides left, so unfortunately this is not that smooth as I expected. But okay, one more thing before ending up this presentation that I have to mention is that Azure Pipelines is just a small part of Azure DevOps platform. So there are other stuff that might be beneficial for us. So for example, Azure Boards. Azure Boards is a full-blown task management solution, so if at some point you'll need something a little bit more complex than just GitHub Actions to distribute tasks between your team, you can use boards by just enabling it in the settings, and you can distribute tasks for different features, sprints, you can see burn down charts and all that Scrum mumbo jumbo if you want to. This is a slide with the links to the documentations that I've referenced in this presentation, and the first one being my blog post. You can actually take out your phone and take a photo of it, and then you will be able to parse the QR code to find out this article at home, because URLs doesn't really work in the presentation mode, so you can take your time and make a photo. Right. So I think that I know what you are thinking right now. What is even simple about that? Right? We started this presentation by saying that we want something simple, lightweight. But consider this. Once you have done this once, you already have your YAML that you can store, I don't know, in Google Drive or wherever you prefer to. You already will have your OpenSSL certificates, and you will already have Azure pipelines being connected to your GitHub. So I think that deploying this solution once again when needed will take somewhere around, I don't know, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, depends on how fast you can set up a connected app on Salesforce side. So for me, 20 minutes sounds easy enough, lightweight enough, and for you, you decide. Thank you for your time, and I'm ready for the Q&A.
When you say that you can exclude branches and other stuff, could we use regular expressions for that?
Yes. Yeah. So for those who are on the call, I'll repeat the question. Can we use regular expressions or wildcards or that kind of stuff when we are specifying which branch we want to include or exclude? Yes, we can, and you can check the Azure Pipelines YAML documentation. It is described there, yeah. I'll open chat, so if someone want to ask something on the call,
I can monitor the chat for you.
yeah,
So
that
far
would.
nothing.
So no.
No.
Any other questions?
As an alternative to Azure pipeline for GitHub, or why you choose this solution?
Why have I chosen GitHub or?
No, why you choose Azure pipeline?
Well, so the question is, why have I chosen Azure pipelines, Azure pipeline instead of choosing I don't know, Jenkins, Travis?
Yes.
You have to set up Jenkins and Travis. You have to set up webhooks. You have to do other configuration stuff. With this, you don't have to. And you know, GitHub is owned by Microsoft, so it's simple as that. Yeah.
Can you please go back to the first step of setup or configuration? I think, yeah, the header was configuration.
I can try.
Okay, I can
Yeah.
ask without slides. So, as far as I remember, first step was to install GDK,
Yeah.
and second step was to install
CLI.
CLI, SFDX.
Yeah.
Is it something that we need to do every time, or we can somehow cache
Yes.
this installation?
So the question is, do we have to configure the build the same time when it runs? Yes, we do, because it is a VM being deployed to Kubernetes. It is a default Ubuntu VM without anything. So yeah, you have to install CLI and GDK each time. It doesn't take too long, to be honest. Yeah, so you do.
Okay, and for which reasons I didn't understand? For which reasons do we need GDK here? GDK is for Java.
Yeah.
Why do we need it?
Well, technically most of the stuff in CLI in SFDX will work without GDK, but at some point you might want to configure Ant or something like that.
Okay.
It depends. You can. It's just the way how I've set up.
Okay.
But the main idea is that we kind of reconfigure stuff, then we do actions, and then it's being cleaned up.
My next question, if you don't mind. On the second step of configuration, you need to choose authorization approach to
Right.
your environment. So you show us GVT approach.
Yeah.
Is it possible to use? I know that the SFDX have multiple authorization approaches, and in my opinion, most simplest one is use OAuth URL. So is it possible to use OAuth URL instead of GVT, or is it something that we can't somehow circumvent?
It is possible, right? Yeah. Technically, you are. If you can do something. So, sorry, I will repeat the question. So the question is, can we use other authorization methods, or can we basically do it somehow else? And the answer is yes. And you are only limited by CLI. If you can repeat those steps in CLI without any UI, anything, yes, you can authorize with OAuth.
We just need to store somewhere this token, and that's it. So using this token, we can authorize to environment. So in my opinion, it's more simple than create connected app.
Yeah, but with this approach, you don't have to do that.
Okay.
One more question. Should we be aware of some specific limitations regarding this?
Good question. Are there any limitations? So as any system as a service solution, Azure Pipelines is free but is limited. And for public repositories, you can run 10 builds at a time, I believe. For privately closed repositories, it is, I think, one parallel build at a time. So you have to consider how you batch your pushes and that kind of stuff. So that is the limit. So when doing something like proof of concept or something that is not client specific, I would suggest you to use publicly open repositories just to not to bother with those parallel stuff. But other than that, I haven't encountered anything.
What about time limits?
No time limits. Yeah, so the question is, are there time limits? Because on GitLab you have, I believe, 2,000 minutes limit for free tier, right? And here you don't have time limit at all, but only the number of parallel jobs running.
Oh, nice. I have a question. Did you try to use based on the big project which already exists?
No, I haven't tried that on the client. That is a prototype. I've tried that only on my environment, and I don't know. It's mostly it is doing the hard work for you. So it's like it generates the X environment, pushes everything there. So if that works when you are doing that manually, that should work. So,
Yeah.
but I haven't had an experience. As I told in log stuff, we use Bitbucket and TeamC, but for some other reasons.
The reason why I asked because on the big project you have a lot of installed managed packages and a lot of metadata, so it can take a big amount of time for SABX pushing and installing on packages. So
Yeah,
my next question
the-
like do you split based on your own package and manage in your big or not?
So the question here is that when we have a big project, it takes a lot of time to deploy, it has a lot of managed packages and that kind of stuff. How will it work? It will take time as any other CI/CD solution. So I don't know, live with it.
Okay, is it a good alternative to prepared solution like Kapado or AfterRabbit? Only your opinion.
It's hard to tell for me, to be honest.
Sorry, what was the question? I didn't hear.
Is it a good alternative to prepared solution which was already built in CI stuff like AutoRabbit or Kapado?
In my opinion, every custom solution much more better than AfterRabbit or Kapado.
But on the big projects it may cost a lot. So that's why I asked about the question. Okay.
So, you know, thinking about it, I would answer it like this. If you have a solution that already works, don't change it. Don't use this. This is this particular solution. I tried to make it as simple as possible for small teams, for someone who don't have CI/CD because it is hard. If you already have a big project, you have an IT team that will handle that for you. You have multiple build agents in your CI. This is not a solution. You already have one, or you already have some general idea. Your IT department might have some general idea how to do that. You might have licenses being bought and that kind of stuff. So it is a bit hard to tell how good is that for big project because I haven't tested that yet. But well, pipelines are not only used for that kind of workload. You can build server-grade solutions and ERP stuff and a lot of other things. So I think that you can configure it, maybe not for free, to configure it to work in parallel, to save some time, to do something faster. It's just I'm not aware how to do that for big Salesforce project.
Okay, thanks.
One more question. Can we run any Apex scripts on the build with this?
Can you run them from CLI?
Why not?
Yeah, so is
You can.
so
Basically,
my
your-
CLI command is available from this.
You're just running CLI.
Okay.
Everything you can do from CLI, please, you can do that. It solely depends on your scenario or what you want to do, run tests or doesn't matter. Any other questions?
Is it going to work with sandboxes?
Why not? There are even Ant builds that are pre-built in Azure pipelines, so you don't have to use Bash to run them, and probably you can configure Ant build and deploy something to Sandbox or whatever. So it should work.
Is there a way to build actual pipeline like in GitLab? In Azure
It is the
pipeline?
same.
It's the same.
It's mostly the same on the different platform with the ability to connect to GitHub with like that. Yes. with some different windows. But yeah.
And also SFDX supports metadata API, so we can just convert the X project into source metadata and use the same commands like deploy, retrieve, validate. So it's
Yeah, no.
actually we don't need even end, I think.
Yeah, but that convert command have one small limitation that I faced a few weeks ago, maybe months. If you deploy object and field on that object have pretty long name, I think 120 lengths, it won't convert it, so it will deploy object without the field.
Okay.
Maybe they fixed it already, but
And did you try use it with end? Probably you may face the same issue. Or in end it works
when
fine.
I convert project, I take a look at metadata converted. And
So
I
it's problem
see
in
that-
convert command.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions from someone participating on the call? Just can can someone check it?
Yeah, there's nothing in the chat yet.
Okay. Anything else?
Hey guys,